process, but we can at least keep having the conversation and then, put it up for folks to look at and let folks know that there's some technical difficulties. Because trying to recapture certain conversations sometimes, it ain't the same conversation. You know what I mean?
So you want to...
Let's take about like 30 more minutes and just the three of us talking, and we'll just announce that we kept going.
Okay, we're on live now.
Yeah, we're on live now.
So, we'll do that. And then try to do some more tech stuff, in a bit. Tanya was talking about she uses Zoom instead of the Google thing. So the advantage of using this as opposed to Skype, for instance, that I know of, is that this goes directly to YouTube. So folks it's recorded and downloaded there. So that's the I guess the evil synergy of all this monopolies being kind of connected, that you can do your Gmail straight to the YouTube.
Right.
But some of these other ones are probably a bit more stable, because it just froze me out. I'm the host, so I don't even know how y'all kept going, and I was froze out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the power of Google. I guess they wanted to hear it, and keep a record of it.
I don't know what's going on.
They just kept letting y'all talk while the host got dropped.
See, Elijah told y'all the white man is the devil. But y'all didn't want to believe him.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother conversation. You taking it all the way back to World War II, huh? You going all the way back.
Evil.
Yeah, well, I'm inclined to agree with you today. But okay, so I got y'all. Let's try 30 more. Let's try 30 more minutes, and then let's do a retake on this and reschedule on this. We still got two more we want to try to do, but I do want to get more detail with this one. This one's been frustrating to me from start to finish, and I'm sure it is to the audience as y'all. People look at this a little bit later, if and when we post this. Just know that the technology gremlins got a little bit of the best of us today. But so bring me up to speed on on the conversation that y'all had, and I guess for those who might have missed it, what was going on. I had a couple of feedbacks on some points I wanted to bring up from where I got disconnected, but y'all kept going. So if y'all can kind of recap some of that, bring that back, I'd appreciate it. Then we can all jump in.
Jared's memory is better than mine.
Well, I mean, essentially, it was just a conversation about how we would want to use electoral politics or voting, and then and Tandy had brought up Sundiata Acoli and other political prisoners, and the suggestion of their work, including doing things like community patrols of accused police officers who have done wrong, to legally harass them and just sort of let them know that as they go about their daily business, whether it's getting coffee or donuts, that we would be there as well. And my quick response to that was just that, well, anything we want to do requires a level of organization that we don't currently have, and that's why I was, my suggestion is just that that's how we approach the idea or the concept of the vote, as just a simple way to sort of get people under the same roof, and then maybe lead to deeper levels of political organization. That's basically what I remember from it, and where we had left off.
Okay. Well, one of the things I was going to just you want to add something to that, Tanya, before I go on?
And I feel like this is the fertile time. We might not have
right
the level of organization needed to pull some of these things off, but this is a fertile time to recruit, to pull people to this vision that we have, to this work that we want to do, and also a check and balance. Find out from others, is this work that we should do? Are we really dealing in pipe dreams, or is there something else that has not factored in that we need to factor in, etc.? So I was saying now, a lot of our theoretical and ideological debates end up as nothing but more than debates, and we want a Cadillac, we want a Mercedes. I know that's very, very materialistic, but work with me. And, but we've been given as a Toyota. Let's do the work in the Toyota. Let's drive this Toyota and do what we need to do, as opposed to sitting behind the wheel of the Toyota saying, dang, where my Cadillac at? I wish I had a Cadillac.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We got something right now in our hands. What are we doing with it other than criticizing it? And of course, critique is good. Principled, constructive critique, ideological critique is good. But as you know, and you and I talked about this the other night, Kali, a lot of that is not what we're seeing. Right. A lot of it is hateration. A lot of it is nonsense. And a lot of it's coming from quarters where no work was going to be done anyway. And those quarters are speaking way too loudly. So, there's work to be done. We're in a movement time, regardless of how we feel about it. Let's do some work.
Mm-hmm. No, I unite with that. I think the only thing that I would put out in a form like this, and this is drawn from the experience of the last couple of years. But I think we can, and I'm talking about the experience of engaging in electoral politics in Jackson the last couple of years. But I think some of it we can extrapolate through our history the last 50 years in particular, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of pitfalls and perils that we need to really put our people up on if you're going to engage this, even on a local level. And we need to get, I think, both sophisticated enough to be able to impart certain kind of lessons. I think clearly and succinctly through the generations, so folks can take the strengths of what different models of what the different experiences are, and jettison the weaknesses, right? And so, so let me cut through part of the chase. So one of the things that was possible in Jackson during Chokwe's first 2 runs, for instance, we could engage in both of those runs because it didn't require a great deal of money to engage in an electoral arena. First on the city council level and then on the mayoral level. And then part of that had to do with both the size of Jackson as a community. It's only about 200,000 people here. And the other thing I think has to do with just the nature of the political economy in general. Now, people shouldn't get it twisted and thinking that there's no capital here. There is capital here. But most of it is so privately owned and concentrated in invested in national, international kind of interests and outlays that it doesn't have a great local impact. It is not particularly invested in the development of business in Jackson or even in Mississippi per se, outside of, like land holdings. But so most of what you have are folks, say like a Jim Barksdale. This is one of the cats who was one of the, I think, founders or initiators of Netscape. He's here. He's here in Jackson, one of the richest men on the planet Earth, and has a small, not a small, but he has a Cadillac company, car dealership here. He makes some investments here and there in education, is in some of the local real estate game. But by no means is most of his, is he trying to do like a Paul Allen or something like that, a la Seattle or what some of the other folks are doing in Portland. And that role of kind of your local bourgeois force, which for us created an opening, because it means that since he's not throwing, and him and the other folks aren't throwing a tremendous amount of money into the electoral arena, at least then, it left forces like us who don't have no money to be able to play in the game and to be able to play in the game in a legitimate manner. Because one of the formulas y'all might have heard me mention was that at least at that time, those first 2 elections with Chokwe, that, we could match people power with financial power, right? We're going to learn, because Chokwe Antar, his son, is running for mayor again. And I think by far and away right now he's in the lead, but, there's still about 7 more months to go. And a lot of road to tread and a lot of people to reach and organize and touch. But we already know from the last special election that the forces of capital paid a tremendous amount of attention to our little experiment, and they are throwing money down here now. So now we are in a scenario where we actually are competing with some of the forces of capital. And that is really kind of driving us and our forces to have to reevaluate some aspects of our strategy. And ultimately what it comes down to, and this is part of an internal debate, I'm just putting it out there so, folks know and can learn from our struggle. It winds up putting you into a particular type of strategic orientation around how you look at class, right? And how do you ally yourself, and who do you ally yourself with in your local environment, in this case, the municipal area, in order to get money to play in the game and get elected, right? And we all know, I don't care to what extent, if it's $5,000, $50,000, if you ain't got nothing, and $5,000 is your main contribution to your election, unless that person is one of the highest moral character individuals on the planet, they're gonna want some kind of return for that little $5,000 investment. So you got to deal with these as concrete realities, and I think we have to, if we're going to use electoral politics, as a tactic, and I think that's all it can be. And I think you can develop a strategy to best exploit that tactic, and that's what a part of the Jackson-Kush plan is, right? Looking at electoral politics as a strategy. But I think the critical piece is we still have to figure out, in Jackson, I think elsewhere, how do we engage this tactic, given the power that it still has in this society, above and beyond our community and above and beyond our kind of class interests? How do we build an independent political force that will truly represent our political, ideological, and different class, race, sex, gender interests, right? And not compromise so much that those real interests get lost, or the stick is bent so much that you wind up in some kind of alliances and relationships which may allow you to be in office, but don't actually put you in power. So, these are things that I think that I would like us to have a deeper conversation about, which to me goes back to the first question I'm trying to invite everybody into, is we still need to look at this whole, to me, we still need to look at this whole thing around the role of elections, right, in this society. And I think first and foremost, I would like to see at least our movement, we're talking about this movement time, I would like to figure out how do we have a conversation and a dialogue to create some consensus within this new iteration of the Black liberation movement, that we are not trying to make this society more palatable. We're not trying to humanize capitalism and make it more, sufferable, but we're trying to change the society from the bottom to the top. And that to the extent that we put time, energy, and money into things like election, we do so in proportion to the other transformative work of organizing our people, building alternative programs, creating new social relationships in the process, that we put these things in equal measure. Because if you're really going to play this game as it's presently constructed, you got to have the money to play the game, right? And then you got to not be taken by the game. And that requires real strong political and ideological grounding. And I think we have to figure out a way and come up with some kind of calculus. Like if A costs more than B, then, you don't do C. If, you know what I mean? Something to the effect, then you can't generalize that around all cases.
But if you can find the money to play this game, why don't you take that money and play your own game?
Well, that's my point about the proportion.
This conundrum that we keep finding ourselves in.
Right. That's my point about the proportion. I'd rather see that money spent on organizing than I would rather see it spent on elections. Just trying to make this conversation practical and concrete, to everybody. And I think, but a deeper part of the question is, see, the three of us might not view elections as the end all to be all, because we have a particular orientation and view about the nature of this very society and the state in general. Not all of our people hold that, right? So how do we move our people to at least a shared understanding of elections as a tactic, right? That's a conversation I think we need to figure out. And I want to try to figure it out in this movement time. Because I think, you know, I was in a conversation, and then I'm going to shut up and let y'all talk and answer. But I was in an interesting conversation. I think I put it on the chat, where there was a little debate going on, and I think there was some truth to it, or there is some truth to it, you know, that kind of the catch-22 that our movement is in right now. So somebody was pointing out that Colin Kaepernick's protests and how that's spreading, you know, amongst these NFL athletes, and I guess now hopefully sounds like some of these NBA players are going to get into the game a little bit as well, but we'll see. But how this protest was actually helping Trump, and how, you know, Charlotte and the upsurge of our people and the resistance going on, you know, with the pipeline, with indigenous folks and folks kind of beginning, I think, to take some principled allied solidarity with them. How you got these two major upsurges hitting at two very different but interrelated parts of the overall social order, the settler nature of it, and continued extraction of resources, continued genocide of indigenous people, the disposing of our people in mass, you know, by another division of the same order, that if it wasn't for movements like this the past 5 or 6 years, there would be no conversation about socialism of any form or fashion, right? That would have never entered into the screen. So that's not something that Bernie created. It's actually something that the social movement created space for there to be a conversation about. He just happened to be the person to kind of either fill in the void or was chosen to fill that void, depending on which narrative you want to go with. But the movement created that space. But we know that when our movement gets going, there is a corresponding backlash, right? And I want to see us not get into a trap, which has been laid out there for us, that we shouldn't be pressing too hard because it'll hurt Hillary and it'll hurt the Democrats. And I want to be able to be in a conversation, particularly with the younger folks in this movement, about, you know, us keeping the heat on the street is what's creating whatever space that actually exists. So how do we strengthen that, fortify that, deepen that, and make it not just a force of disruption, but a force of revolutionary change?
Well, first of all, we should just remind, you know, anybody engaged in these public activities in the streets or wherever, that they're responding to conditions that were created largely, if not mostly, by the Democratic Party. So if the Democratic Party wants to now claim that these people in the streets are going to be helping the Republicans get Trump elected, they need to be reminded that Trump only exists as a possibility because you know, the Democrats and the so-called liberal wing of the ruling elite have made this country and life in it untenable. So we should never let anybody back anyone up from radical, uproarious response to what's going on. But I guess where I just keep coming back to, the only thing I see is a possibility here is that we can't provide any options for young people, for new generations of activists, for the masses more broadly speaking, until we who claim to be on the same page more or less do better to organize ourselves.
I agree with that 100%.
So this is why I just keep saying that in terms of the vote, I would just like to see folks like those of us on these calls take a more organized and aggressive push, whether it's within the Green Party or not, to just say we are going to put our voting lives here. Now, again, we'll make the point clear as day or clear as possible that we're not seeing voting as a solution to these problems or the only solution, But as a practical, pragmatic step, we're going to break with the Democratic Party, and we're going to put our voting over here, and we're going to provide an option for people who want to use the vote to make change, to actually have an opportunity for that to take place, and give them a legitimate option that prevents them from going back to the Democratic Party. Because I think, Khalid, what you were touching on, at least as I interpret it, is exactly how I see with the Obama phenomena and then the Sanders phenomena, that it's people in the streets here and abroad internationally that have created a situation where those in power have to reframe or rebrand their leadership. So it was known long before Bernie made his campaign. It was known that 2/3 of young people, white or black, in this country thought socialism was more or less a positive thing. That it was known long before Bernie made his run that young people in particular, but many others, broadly speaking, were frustrated and dissatisfied with electoral politics as they were being run, and many other things. So that's why even before all of that, we were given Obama to save us from going off the plantation globally after 8 years of Bush. And then when they see Obama leaving, and then there's obviously no alternative that is as perfect as him to replace him. We get the push and the encouragement, I'm sure, from elements within the party, because we all know how this goes. I mean, this happened with me within the Green Party. We know how it happens with, that there are segments within these parties. There are different formations and groups within these parties that have their own agenda. So whatever version of that was within the Democratic Party, they went to Bernie and said, "Hey man, get out there. Let's run a campaign. Let's run you. Let's get you out there on this platform." In part, whether they shared it with him or not, I'm sure this was done so that the Democratic Party would not lose the base it needed to get Hillary elected, to get Hillary, back in there, and to keep all of us, or as many of us as possible, from again breaking with the Democratic Party and starting to develop something else. Excuse me. So I would like to just see us work a little bit harder to build that option. Those of us who already agree, before we go and recruit others to join us, that we build this option and say, this is what we're going to do when it comes to the vote. Here's where we are, and here are the reasons why, and this is what we want to invite you to join us in, and give them something concrete. It's relatively easy. It's perfectly legal. We're not asking people to do anything, necessarily threatening to their livelihood or to their so-called freedom. That's the only way I see this thing improving. I don't. At this point, I'm not sure I see any other way out.
John, do you got anything on that? You want to add to that?
No, sir. Jared said it all.
Y'all are killing me.
Housekeeping stuff, brother. I'm sorry. Some housekeeping stuff.
Y'all are killing me. All right. Well, look. I got a response to that, Jared.
Okay.
But there's a level of organization, analysis that I think has to happen before that. There's in short, I think there's some what I would call party building work that needs to happen before that. So we don't, the forces that want to engage in that don't make that the end all to be all of our activity and our, our focus. And I think, we need to have something that I think takes a real serious look at this society and the world, and where it's headed, and figure out some programmatic ways, however small they may be, to connect. Now, I'm saying that because I don't want to see us just totally an initiative totally bent to spontaneity. That winds up being another form of opportunism.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think, if we're going to put everything in proportion or in balance, as was mentioned, and I think what Tanya and I'm sure you guys have talked about before, time, energy, and resources. I think we need to try to get programmatic clarity as much as possible. Now, I would love to see us have ideological clarity, but I don't think that is. I think we need to be, I'm not going to say flexible, but I think we need to be fluid in that regard, much more fluid than our models of the 20th century, I think, often allowed for, right?
Yeah, Bruce Lee said, be like water. He's still right. Because you won't be able to fit into this cup.
Yeah, I remember Bruce, and from was taught in those method and ways in my own martial arts training. No, there's truth to that. Ain't no question about that. But it typically takes other forces to make, water into a flood. It within itself oftentimes is not, sufficient,
Right.
And it takes other forces to make water boil. It within itself is not necessarily, sufficient. So I think it's not just water and being flexible. I think we have to figure out some ways to take, the streams that exist of revolutionary kind of thought and action that exists both within our movement and within the society in general. So, how can we build something that has, revolutionary nationalists, socialists, communists, anarchists, in it, working together, using an intersectional framework, can we do that? I think we can. I think we have to. And I think we got to put in the time and energy to kind of figure that out, taking the both the rights and the wrongs of the experiments of the 20th century, the rights and wrongs of our own experiments and our own actions, and I think and try to put something together. And I think the challenge is, making legitimate links, I think, to some of the better struggles that are happening, on the ground. So one of the things I think, like say in Jackson, I think we got a little something going on here, but, we keep reaching out in a number of different ways to try to connect with forces in Detroit, try to connect with forces, in Atlanta, try to connect with forces in New York, try to connect with forces, throughout this empire. But we run into a kind of a capacity and resource gap, just within the area of that work. That I think we have to figure out how can we tie into folks, in other places to be kind of a glue, but they're not disconnected from local work, because I think people have to be grounded in local work, I think, in order to be real on a certain level. But everybody can't do the same things on a local level. Everybody can't do the same thing on a national level, nor need to. So I think we have to kind of take the time, energy to kind of figure this out. I don't think it's going to be a rush job per se, but I don't think it can be try to take forever, like another 10 years either.
One of our many issues is because we are under attack, as war is declared on us, we're in crisis mode. So we're trying to survive. We're trying to survive, and we're also trying to survive by beating back these attacks against us.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that when you talk about party building, when you talk about organizing, there has to be an idea that organizers are needed, not only to effectively push back police killings, which is the quick and public deaths of our people, but to push back the private, slow deaths of our people, the state-sanctioned violence in other areas, in terms of poisoned water, in terms of lead poisoning in the paint in these apartment buildings, these slumlords, etc., not having health care, having food, quote unquote, apartheid, Bantustans, these areas where we can't get fresh food in our communities. So we need to have a core of organizers that can, or there needs to be a commitment to this idea that not only do we need to push back this war that's being waged against us, but how do we also build that, what we're trying to get to.
Mm-hmm.
So our strategy, we're not trying to run people for public office, or what are we trying to run people for public office? We're trying to get control of resources that are going to better our lives so that we can stick around and survive and make it to liberation or to freedom. I think, correct me if I'm wrong. Our end goal is power. Our end goal is determining our own destiny. But if we're not going to be here to do that, how do we get from point A to point B? Right now, we're being shot down in the street, whether we comply or not. That needs to be addressed. But also, what is the root cause behind that? That needs to be addressed. So right now, you've got people in the streets of Charlotte. People have been in the streets of different areas responding to these police murders, these assassinations. The energy there, these are young people. This is spontaneous. And the police need to be confronted. But what else do we do? How do we organize for the long term? You had a place in Tennessee called the Highlander Center, the space that was available for organizers to come during the Civil Rights Movement. Jackson,
it's still there.
Right. I'm saying Jackson could be that same type of center where we're creating these revolutionary nationalist organizers who are going to not only work in Jackson or not only work in according to the adherents of the Jackson Kush plan, but they're going to come to LA and help us deal with this, help provide backup to the organizers who are here to deal with these murderous police and this black woman prosecutor who refuses to hold police accountable. They will go to Chicago. They will go to these other areas. So that could be, that's what Cooperation Jackson, that's what that center, the Lumumba Center could be, that type of springboard elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, you read my mind. That's something that we are trying to work on.
You talk about linking with people elsewhere. We got crises in these cities that we're trying to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
How do
we got crisis? We got crisis here.
Crisis.
Struggle in office. It ain't stopped not one iota of that. To a certain extent. Just to be real, it was a short 9-month experiment that has some potential.
To keep it even realer, our quest for power like that, like putting a Chokwe Lumumba or a Chokwe Antar Lumumba in office, is going to create some more crisis.
Absolutely.
It's going to create some more crisis because they don't want that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely clear on that. Yeah.
Yeah. We've already seen it. That's for another conversation, but you're absolutely right. There's more eyes and ears, on the local level and on the regional level who I think are willing to go to great extent to either undermine such an administration as the Chokwe Antar Lumumba administration, or to just make it untenable, win and if he wins. And that's something I think we definitely have to get prepared for. But,
But we have to fight. We have to organize regardless of what other folks are doing. We have to organize. We have to fight. How can we best do that? How can we most effectively do that is the question.
Right. So the next time, I think we got to go more into this. I want to respect y'all time, respect the audience's time. Again, apologize to everybody for the technical issues. We'll try to figure that out, and probably going to use a different platform or medium for the next one. Because we've had a little bit of challenges both times.
Well, but just real quick, man, I would want to say this publicly that I think that your effort here should be commended, and that people need to understand that as we struggle with these technological issues, that we're all doing this without resources, without support, without big institutions backing us. So I just want to say that I appreciate you trying to bring these kind of conversations together, because we desperately need a bunch more, sets of conversations and expansion of the conversations and range of the conversations than we're getting in many spaces, including in spaces that are supposed to be alternative. They're not that alternative. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there real quick for anybody who might be like, where the technology wasn't working or whatever, or we're frustrated at watching this, that I appreciate your effort in putting this together.
I appreciate that. We're going to keep trying. I live by a model of and I'm gonna fail better each time I fail. you know, but keep going forward, keep knocking the dust off, and keep getting up, because really don't have no quitting is not an option. So
yeah. Hey, and I would want to have this conversation with the two of you if nobody saw it. So personally, selfishly, I enjoy it anyway.
Well, we just scratched the surface. I mean, yeah. I think we were getting heated up, and I think we could have gone in deeper. I mean, one of the things I do want to figure out. Let me put this out there. I don't think we really touched on all the pieces where I was going to try to take us with some of the questions around electoralism and both the strengths and weaknesses. I think the main point I would really just want to get home, and I think try to reinforce to young folks that, for at least from my vantage point, I think I put it to you all in the chat. We have to deal with the power that this system has over us. There's no question. We can't ignore it. Mm-hmm. But we have to get focused on, what is the new society that we want to create, and what is the program that we can develop, given our limited resources, to get us there. And I think, we struggle for resources, but if they come, they come. If they don't, they don't, and we got to figure out ways to keep kind of moving forward. And I think one of the things about this Bernie piece that we always talk about in our own movement, but it's demonstrated, I think, a few times over now that, to the extent that he was able to get all these small contributions of $5 and $10 and $20, dollars, and get them in mass in the hundreds, if not the thousands, that added up to a sizable portion of money. And I think we have to find ways, and this is something we're struggling with in Cooperation Jackson, try to find ways to get people to believe in what we're doing. It has some potential to be transformative, and not just, that y'all doing some good work, but it's like, okay, make an investment in that so that we can both continue it and expand it. But there is an element of belief that we got to tackle, because one of the people still believe in the electoral system, whether they fight it or not. They still believe in it. And I think we have to figure out some ways to challenge that and to get people to look at their time and energy as something that they can put to other things that will actually probably yield more results and change, but more in the long-term way than in the short-term way, which I think sometimes there's too much gratification kind of put into elections. But we got to figure this out, and I want us to figure out how to have a way to talk about program. What is the actual program that the Black liberation movement and the radical movement in this society can build and has to build, which is separate and distinct to a certain extent from what we're demanding, right? Not that we don't demand and that we should drop our demands. I'm not saying that in any form or fashion, but what are the things that we can do short of those demands being realized and us having the strength to extract that either from capital or the state? What are the things that we do to continue to build our own power to put us on the level of, we can get to the point, this or else, change or else, and we get to a place where Charlotte is not just disruptive, but potentially a dress rehearsal for something far more transformative.
Mm-hmm.
A woman.
Ashe.
So with that, I want to thank the two of y'all. We're going to let everybody know who continues to watch this. We're going to put this out tonight because there is a link once this thing kind of go live and folks can kind of check out the conversation that we continue to have. It was an incomplete conversation, unfortunately, but we are going to reschedule it. We're going to do 2 more of these in some different form or platform. Either we get this one to work or we'll go to another. We'll do some experimenting to figure that out. And we're going to take up Jared on his, I think, brilliant idea that on November 8th, we're going to pull a little team together and have our own kind of analysis of the presidential spectator sport and both focus on, how that's playing out. But then I think more importantly, what do we need to do come November 9th and beyond to start focusing in on that program? So Be on the lookout for us then, and be on the lookout for us again in probably early October and now late October. We're going to do early October with the rehash of this conversation, going a little bit deeper and focus on it. We'll have Jared and Tandy back if they're both willing to come back and try to add some new folks on as well, technology permitting. And then at the end of October, do another piece, and then November, and that'll kind of finish at least this series for the American Nightmare Project and what we've been trying to do and focus in on the nature of this system, and particularly around electoral politics and its impact on Black people and what we're calling the disposable age. And then we'll try to focus some new stuff on finishing that project that takes us into how do we build an actual program that'll take us, either some inches forward towards liberation or some miles. That's up for us to determine and put in practice and figure out. So thank you, everybody, and thank you all again.
Thank you.
Y'all take care.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Have a good one.
Okay, peace.